Welcome everyone to the last technical session of the day. The discussion of this session will be based on SS and equity in higher education. We have here Professor P. Suresh Kumar, member of the Kerala Public Service Commission, who was the former economic professor of Government College Attingal. On behalf of our center, I welcome you, sir, to kindly chair the session. And we have the key speaker, Dr. N. Murugan, Associate Professor, Rajiv Gandhi Institute of Development Studies, Trivandrum. I welcome you, sir, to this session. And we have the two presenters. One is our dear Manju ma'am, Associate Professor, Department of Economics, who will be presenting on Visibly Invisible, the case of disabled in Kerala higher education scenario. I welcome you, ma'am. And next we have Dr. S.R. Shija, Assistant Professor, IDE University of Kerala, who will be presenting on SS and equity in higher education in India. I welcome you, ma'am, to the session, and I welcome each and every one of you and hope for your patient and active participation. Thank you.
Distinguished panelists, seminar participants, dear students, friends. Actually, this session was scheduled 3:30 to 4:40 p.m. so that at this point of time we have to close had it been on schedule. So I think that I'm not going to make a extensive introductory remarks on this particular topic. In this session there are three papers. Dr. N. Murugan, Dr. Manju, Dr. S.R. Shija, and all these papers broadly relate to access and equity in higher education, and all these papers almost relate to the situation in Kerala also. As I told, I am not going to make an extensive talk on this particular topic, but some of my observations I would like to submit before you, because that will help you to have a critical understanding of this particular topic and also the content of the papers that these distinguished panelists are going to submit. I think that this access and equity are the two terms which has to get its meaning from the context in which we are using. So straight away I am putting that there is a static frame within which this access and equity should be interpreted, and also there is a dynamic frame which we should use to get the meaning of these two terms, access and equity. Regarding this access, in simple terms, if we are ensuring educational opportunities to meritorious students, then we say that there is access. And if opportunities are denied to them because of some reasons, it involves a denial of access. But in this access, as economists we should see, if providing education is the responsibility of the government cannot divert all the resources for meeting the needs of educational requirements of a society. So resource constraint is a limitation. And once this resource constraint is there, strictly speaking, equity and access can be ensured only to a few, which we may term as meritorious students. But what is meritorious? Of course, so many discussions may be there, so many deliberations may be there, because merit often depends upon income level, status of the parents, religious differences, then trust-based norms, things like that. But whatever it may be, in a democratic setup, always there is an attempt to concretize what is merit, even though we may not be able to find out if a well acceptable term, merit. But my point is different one, in the sense that if some people are taken as meritorious students, and if access and equity in that way ensured to them, obviously there is another group who are excluded. I will term them as aspirants. They want to study, but there is no possibility of entering into a university because seats are limited. So aspirants are there. So when in a society there are some aspirants, these aspirants constitute a section who were denied access to education, were denied equity because of the resource constraint of the government. So if government cannot find out enough resources, definitely this question of equity, this question of access comes into being. So my submission is this: in this context, as economists, we should encourage, we should welcome the participation of private capital in educational scenario. So once private capital is also allowed, along with the government's restrained financial structure or financial capability, then both this mobilization of resources can meet the needs of both the meritorious students and the aspirants, depending upon the changes in the economic system or changes in the economic growth situation of the country. Previous speaker mentioned about the Singaporean model, and it was an evolutionary phase that education system is matured into one of the best in the world. So you see that in that evolutionary process, both finance mobilization happened from the private sector and also from the government sector. So I am just telling this because in Kerala we have what is called an anathema towards private capital. We consider that when private capital is allowed, that will erode some value systems that's already taken its weight or its power in the economy in our state. Also, we don't like what is called profit-making endeavors. We consider that what is private, that is always there to exploit people, and profit-making is not a right kind of approach or a right kind of policy. This is special about Keralites. Even though all of the political parties and leaders are interested in profit sharing, they dislike profit making. That's why I think that this private capital is supposed to be not good, particularly in the education scenario in Kerala. This such a kind of mindset is there. So my point is that when you talk about equity, when you talk about access to higher education, the role of private capital and the role of government intervention, both should be taken care of. Then it should be considered as a market system, because profit making is there in education scenario. Without profit, private mechanism cannot work. But you should remember, when a private institution is made its presence in the economy, it is producing knowledge system within the broad frame which is formulated by the government. Then it's a product that is available for purchase by consumers. When the economy is growing, when the economy is getting strengthened in its economic terms, there are buyers. So the aspirants become the buyers in the course of expansion of education system and also in the course of development of the economy. So there, when this product is brought and sold, profit should be there, and profit should be what is called reused and recuperated in order to strengthen that system. It goes like that. But at the same time, we should have another dimension, in the sense that what is the nature of this product? This nature of the product is a social product because of its externalities. Of course, positive externalities and negative externalities may be there. And since the product is a social product, government intervention is necessary, because social necessity is there to see that the product that is available for the society as a whole should be produced in a desirable way, in an acceptable way. So that government formulation of policies are very important when private role is allowed for the private capital is allowed in the educational scenario. But what about the situation of the governance in the state regarding higher education policy? If we take into consideration the professional admissions in each year, whatever may be the form of government, whether UDF or LDF, every year there is confusion and there is always a fuss. Because you see that it's nothing but the discussions, the secret discussions are about the sharing of the seats or sharing of the profit. So good governance is not there, and all the quality erosion that is taking place in Kerala economy regarding this higher education emerges from this hidden agenda of almost all the participants, whether it is LDF or whether it is UDF. So even though private capital is allowed to function in our society, it is not on the basis of good market principles that is allowed to work. It is working on a hidden scenario. That is the thing. So good governance is absent, and that is the first reason for the quality erosion of the higher education system in Kerala. Then one more thing is this. We are against what is called the self-financing mode of education system. But self-financing mode was there not after 1991. Even before that, self-financing was there. Aided systems. What is this aided system? It is also a profit mechanism. Profit-making mechanism, because recruitment is done by private management, whereas payment is made by the government. So it was done right from the beginning. So self-financing mode 1. And after 1990, self-financing mode 2, in the sense that you can straight away start medical colleges or engineering colleges or arts and science colleges and make profit. So the thing is that even though we say that we are all for what is called certain values for higher education systems and all the political parties, all the governments in different ways and different methods propagate what is called a secret working of the market mechanism, plundering the people. This is a reality. And the quality erosion of the universities, quality erosion of all the institutions in the universities just taking place due to the reinforced working of these kind of situations. So it is in this milieu that we are talking about what is called access and equity. What kind of access and what kind of equity under such a shady system can emerge, all of us know. So as youngsters, we have to look into, you have to look into what is called the finer aspects of the good governance. What mechanism we can do in a democratic frame or in a democratic framework, what kind of interventions we can make. That is what we have to think when we talk the terms like access and equity in higher education in Kerala context. So you see that there are 3 papers, and in all these 3 papers at micro level, these access and equity questions are discussed. I first invite Dr. N. Murugan to present his paper.
Respected Chairman, Professor Suresh Kumar, distinguished professors, experts, and dear participants. This is part of a larger study conducted by myself and Sri N. Neethi at Rajiv Gandhi Institute of Development Studies, Trivandrum. This part is somewhat lengthy. I will make it as brief as possible. The ancient India has a very glorious system. Ancient India had a very glorious system of education which compared with the very best in the ancient world. Modern education started in India in 1835 by the English Education Act 1835 based on the Macaulay's famous minutes. At the time of independence in 1947, there were 594 colleges and only 21 universities, which included technical as well as professional colleges. From 1950 to 2015, number of universities increased 29 times and the number of colleges increased 52 times. As per the statistics available for last year, there are 711 universities, 77 institutions of national importance, and 40,760 colleges in the country, which cater to the needs of 26.6 million students. The table shows the decadal growth of education, higher education growth in India. In pre-independence Kerala, though general education was almost made universal, at least massified as the earlier speaker has said, the growth of higher education was at a very slow pace. At the time of independence, there were only 23 colleges and only one university in Kerala. At present, there are 18 universities, 5 institutions of national importance, and 1,345 colleges. The arrival of large number of self-financing colleges in Kerala during the first decade of the present century altered the Kerala educational scenario completely. Table 2, this table depicts the category-wise as well as sector-wise number of various types of colleges in Kerala. While this table gives the district-wise and sector-wise number of colleges. From these two tables, it is clear that of the total number of colleges in all category, 71.22% are self-financing colleges. This data roughly accommodates about more than 60% of the students to be governed by the modalities of self-financing colleges. Hence, any lacunae in the functioning of self-financing colleges in Kerala is bound to create serious problems for the society, apart from issues related to access and equity. Table 3 indicates that the district-wise distribution of colleges is not uniform. In Ernakulam and Trivandrum, the largest number of colleges, while in some districts the number of colleges is very less. But this may be due to the level of development as well as concentration of population. Another reason is preference of self-financing college managements to choose locations around big cities for their institutions. Now, objectives of this study. Education has a social function that allows individuals to actively participate in a collective life. When higher education is entirely supported by the welfare state, the growth in the number of seats can only be moderate, and hence it limits the access to higher education. When the scope of growth of higher education in the public sector is limited due to financial and other constraints, as the chairman has now noted, then naturally private sector is the only alternative. This situation is bound to create new problems on equity, access and quality. The present study therefore critically examines how the modalities of access and equity are being undertaken in the everyday activities of self-financing colleges in the state of Kerala. This is the objective 1. The second objective is analysis of intersectionality between education on the one side and social structures like caste, income, gender, religion and region on the other has been one of the critical questions for social inquiry. Complex and diverse spectrums of structural factors of this kind are hindrance to equity in providing education for all. The students who come from low income families hailing from rural area normally lack access in good institutions in urban or semi-urban areas. Even subsidized education for them may not ensure equity. The study would critically examine these aspects. Third objective is, on the wake of globalization, nature of labor market has been undergoing tremendous transformations since 1980s. Since the labor market is driven by demand and supply, education has a direct impact on the former, vice versa later. However, labor market too discriminate the educated ones coming from private institutions in large scale, as occupational opportunity profiles keep very low. The study will examine the implications of labor market in higher education in the context of globalization and how the agencies, state and students negotiate with the new situation. Objective 4 was the outgrowth of professional education institutions in the private sector in Kerala has direct impact on socio-economic growth. Proper regulation and monitoring of self-financing colleges are needed as a part of public policy, as they have been operated in various modes such as government aided, government owned self-financing and private owned self-financing colleges in the state. The study will look into the intricacies of public policies on self-financing colleges to evaluate how various stakeholders ensure equity and quality. Coming to the methodology part, both primary and secondary data were used for this study. Now, coming to major findings. 1. The capital expenditure for starting and maintaining an engineering college is much higher than that of an arts and science college. Some of the private engineering colleges have arranged world-class facilities much better than available in government engineering colleges. Self-financing arts and science colleges lag much behind. Next, the private players who started engineering colleges in the first decade of this century could reap huge profits. Now, due to proliferation of engineering colleges, sizable number of seats are laying vacant in majority of colleges. Next, most of the self-financing arts and science colleges started after 2002 offer a very narrow range of courses designed to suit job market. Among them, there are private as well as government bar university sponsored colleges. Majority of self-financing arts and science colleges have only 2 or maximum 3 courses. Next finding is, in Kerala, access and equity of both sexes to higher education has improved. In many instances, women outnumber men. Next, in private colleges, the percentage of students belonging to the religion of the owner or management is found to be higher. Next is, Hindu, Christian and Muslim teachers vary in number proportional to the variation found in their population in different parts of the state. Next, a very high percentage, that is 61.88% of teachers is found to be drawn from general caste considered as upper caste, while OBCs constitute 35% and SC/ST candidates constitute only 3.13%. The high percentage of upper caste among teachers may be due to the absence of reservation in the recruitment of teachers in private self-financing colleges. Next, there exists the perennial problem of poor access for students belonging to the financially weaker sections of society. Even those getting access may be denied equity and drop out without completing the course. Though the percentage of general category and OBC students getting admission in self-financing colleges are satisfactory, the number of SC/ST students are less than their percentage population. This may be due to their inability to secure admission in the management quota by paying high fees. A general observation we can make from the sample on social background from categories of colleges is that general category students who are from those referred to as upper caste give lower preference to arts and science courses. The income status of family members of students clearly indicate that the arts and science college students are hailing from poor economic backgrounds compared to the engineering college students. This is a clear indication of the barrier for access and equity in higher education in Kerala. More educated parents prefer engineering and other professional courses over arts and science courses for their children. Less educated and less privileged sections of society opt for arts and science courses due to the lower costs involved. Students, faculty members and principals feel that mere access will not guarantee equity. It is only the first step towards equity, and it is not an end but a means to equity. Quality of institution and good teaching are critical factors. Family background, caste and religion are also deciding factors as far as equity is concerned. Due to huge expenditure, equity is not possible in the private sector. Majority of respondents feel profit motive and not equity is the driving force of the private sector. The attempts to attain equity is a long process which involves training, learning, testing, correcting, grooming and assuring employability. So majority of teachers and principals have opinion that individual differences, social bar financial background, character and interest in study are also critical factors. Even in the same locality, quality of education imparted by different colleges show vast variation, leading to the denial of equity to a very great extent. Small percentage of respondents have stated that discriminations do exist in private institutions based on caste, religion and relationship with the management. Majority of the respondents have identified knowledge as the basis of economic empowerment. Knowledge leads to better job and better life. Greater knowledge leads to greater development in all sectors of economy, and knowledge leads to new ideas without which we cannot survive. Majority of students think that labor market discriminates students from private sector, while agreeing that the growth of self-financing colleges is due to the expansion of labor market. The responses of students on reservation are very interesting from the sociological point of view, as 29% of students argue for economic criteria for reservation. But majority of principals and faculty have positive opinion on reservation extended by the government in private sector to the downtrodden. As long as there is social injustice in the form of caste, then positive discrimination is a must. Priority given to institutions by students and parents for admission is mainly based on fee structure. Previous results, placement and reputation of the colleges also play a part in their decision. Majority of students, faculty members and principals support the role of government in the affairs of the private sector. The state should implement schemes to control functioning of self-financing institutions and to enhance their equity and quality aspects. Now we are coming to data analysis, and I will make it as brief as possible.
Having presented the basic findings, it is clear to them. If they have any doubts regarding the database, they may approach concerned.
Then I will straight go to the conclusion part. We feel that self-financing colleges are here to stay, and in the years to come they are bound to play increasingly dominant roles. SC/ST students from rural areas getting admitted to BTech courses feel acute discrimination. If these students were allowed to share their anxieties with their teachers, many of their problems would have been solved. But they hesitate to approach the teachers and open their mind. Final result is that most of them fail to reach their goal. In private self-financing colleges, we saw less intelligent students and underpaid faculty with a disciplined campus and good infrastructure facilities. That is a very important finding. In self-financing colleges, we saw less intelligent students and underpaid faculty with a disciplined campus and good infrastructural facilities. In government and aided colleges, the overall teaching learning process is less, teacher-student relations cold, and teachers are not self-motivated. We feel that outlook of government bar aided college teachers have to change for improving quality of our higher education. The present expansion of private higher education institutions globally is unprecedented. Recent studies have conclusively proved that this expansion of private institutions have improved access. However, the bigger question whether they have improved equity leads to a very complex answer. Research studies, including ours, suggest that improved access can contribute to improved equity, provided greater opportunities offer a fair chance for all. Private higher education institutions are usually set up in major cities and towns. So students from rural areas who are badly in need of education are not usually served by these private higher education institutions. Moreover, these institutions are not providing proper accommodation to the students. These transport facilities from villages to these institutions are very poor, which further aggravates the problem. Compared to rural boys, girls are more affected by these constraints. Since fee for private higher education tends to be much higher than that for public institutions, students from poor families find it difficult to gain admission into these private institutions. What is clear, therefore, is that private higher education has not contributed much to the penetration of higher education in the areas of need. What is clear, therefore, is that private higher education has not contributed much to the penetration of higher education in the areas of need. Since the focus of private institutions is self-financing, and cost recovery, including profit making, the number of financial support instruments available for students tend to be limited in self-financing institutions, thereby placing poor students at a great disadvantage. So our conclusion is that equitable access is far from being achieved in private higher education institutions. Equitable access is far from being achieved in private higher education institutions. Since private institutions by nature are accessible only to those who can pay, the responsibility of providing low-cost higher education and equal opportunity to all students rests with the public institutions. This fact points to the urgent need for revitalizing publicly funded higher education institutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. N. Murugan. And the next paper is going to be submitted by Dr. Manju S. Nair. I invite Manju S. Nair to present the paper, strictly within 10 minutes time.
So good afternoon, everybody. And I know it's very late, and I feel myself and Shija to be excluded. And I am also speaking on a group who are completely excluded from higher education, and my paper is titled Visibly Invisible, the Case of Persons with Disabilities in Higher Education. So persons with disabilities, persons with disabilities, they form the largest minority group in the world, and they are starved of the facilities and services that are available to the general population, and hence they become the least healthy, the least nourished, the least educated, and the least employed. And this discrimination becomes very much severe once you add the gender component. That is, women and girls with disabilities tend to be poorer than the other components, and once the social component is also added, that means when you have the class, the social identity, the gender identity, and the disability identity interacting with each other, you know, the discrimination becomes very much powerful. But you should understand that it goes without saying that these persons, the persons with disabilities, are also a part of the larger human society, and they also are entitled to each set of human rights and fundamental freedoms that we enjoy. And studies have shown that if you provide them with education and training, they are also able to contribute not only to themselves but also to the society at a large. So when you think about what I would like to bring to your attention is that providing education and training to this vulnerable section of the society is the only way that you can make them come into lead a social life, a normal life like that of any other individual in the society. And in India, we see that once you look into the education policies that are directed towards the persons with disabilities, now till late we didn't have any inclusive policy with regard to persons with disabilities, and of late there had been some changes, but the focus is only on elementary and secondary education, and this has not automatically been transferred to their inclusion in higher education. And you know that both this, on the one hand the elementary and secondary education, and on the other hand the higher education, are separate in admission, curriculum, governance, finance and policy, and higher education has its own importance in terms of employability, political power and national development. And it is against this background that I would like to examine the question of disabled in the higher education scenario both in India and Kerala. And I think I'll summarize the first two sessions as a concept on disability and the socio-economic status of the disabled in India and Kerala, and will focus on the higher disabled in the higher education scenario in Kerala. And as such, disability, it's a very difficult and complex concept to define, because it will take a lot of time to explain that. UN has given this definition, that is, a disabled person is a person who is unable to ensure by himself or herself wholly or partly the necessities of a normal individual or social life as a result of deficiency, either congenital or not, in his or her physical or mental capabilities. And we often speak about three models of disability, where you say that medical model, it means that it's the inefficiency of the medical system that these persons remain disabled. The charity model means that the welfare of the disabled depends upon the charity of the others in the society. And the latest one is a social model, which says that it's the society's attitude towards these persons that finally turn them into persons with disabilities. And on the basis of the social model, we now have a human rights model to disability also. And coming to the disability estimates in India, latest census, that is 2011, shows that you have more than 2.21 persons with disabilities in India, with differences in rural, urban, etc. Now skipping all this, the work participation rates in both NSSO data and the census data shows how deficient are these people in work participation rates, in their education levels, in their employment levels. This is the NSSO result, which shows that 83.4% of the female disabled in India remain unemployed. And even the society's attitudes towards disabled, now you should think about that, because these attitudes are contributing to converting impairments into disabilities, and for the females it is particularly very worse. Now we say that it's about disability is perceived as a punishment for the misdeeds in the past life of these persons with disabilities or the wrongdoings of or their parents. At the religious level, we say this is divine justice, or at the mundane level, we feel it as to see a disabled person as inauspicious. Now, traditional Hindu methodology also have several characters who are very cruel when you think about the disability, Dhritarashtra, Shakuni, etc., historical figures also. And even in films, we have such situations. Now, during the time when we were doing our degree classes, this film was released Sajan, Man, etc. And even Malayalam films, you can think about Kunni Kunan, Agale, etc. You see how you have gender discrimination being perceived in terms of disability. And the violence against these people also. Now, this is just to give an idea about the socio-economic situations and how the society perceives or see these people. And again, coming to the Kerala case, we speak about Kerala's model of development without much, you have a higher human development index without any difference in gender equity, or gender development index of Kerala is also equally applicable in the case of this is very high, and you have to check whether this is equally applicable in the case of the disabled population. And Kerala has 2.7 census data, 2.7% of our persons as disabled. And again, the literacy rate for the general population in Kerala is very high, more than 90%, and you can see for the disabled person it is very low. It's the literacy categories among the different disabled groups in Kerala. And among about the work participation rate, it's as low as 10.3 for the disabled females in Kerala. And this is a part of the larger project that we have already completed. We have collected data from around 300 disabled across Kerala, and we couldn't find even a single person who had gone for higher education. And the socio-economic status, educational attainments, those who are employed in very petty levels of jobs, so service sectors. Now, regarding the perception, awareness, etc., we saw a very, very dismal picture. And then coming to the disabled in the higher education scenario, and a survey has been conducted among the topmost universities and IIMs and IITs, and it shows that 0.56% seats in higher education, only 0.56% of the seats go to these categories, whereas we have a 3% reservation for them, and of which only 74, and the major share is occupied by males, around 75%. And India across 1.2% of the students with disabilities only have access to higher education. And the National Center, the survey has been conducted by the National Center for the Promotion of Employment of Disabled. And there has been a scheme which is called the Higher Education Scheme for Persons with Special Needs, where universities could apply for that, where you had three components: establishment of enabling units, creating accessibility to the disabled, and special equipments. Now, at an initial amount, ₹10 lakhs was granted, and only 8 universities in India applied for this. This is what data shows. And a survey recently around 119 universities, where it shows that only 0.1% of the total students belong to the persons with disabilities category. And this is the latest data from, India. Kerala is the first first state which conducted a disability census survey now, and results came in 2015, and we can see how far Kerala is faring in the case of higher education, with only 2% of the disabled being enrolled in higher education, whereas our general, this higher education general enrollment ratio is greater than 25%. And enrollment percentages, even in the primary and the secondary education level, we have seen that it is fully 31%, whereas it is 99 for the general category. And what are the challenges? The lack of accessible facilities, accessible lesson content, sensitive teachers who are competent, etc. And we have a huge dropout rate in the lower sections itself, and we have normally a system of progression where the progression is almost automatic until the final milestone is reached, that's a 10th standard or the 12th standard. So it normally becomes a miracle every time a child or his parents fight against these issues and pass out of the school. And what happens if some of them enters the colleges? You know how the higher education system is different from the elementary and the secondary system, and from a sheltered and coached world, the students step into a world where self-sufficiency becomes a necessity. And from a standalone subject exam-based system in schools, peer comparison and competition becomes the new norm. From a local school where travel was relatively simple, students move to places of higher education, they face tougher competition, transportation issues, and in many cases they require residential programs. And from a homogeneous culturally aligned peer group, the student gets thrown up into a multicultural, multilingual groups, etc. And these are daunting challenges even for able-bodied, well-prepared, well-supported students to cope with. And once for the persons with children with disabilities, you know the situation, how this becomes a big challenge for them. And we have started some surveys regarding the teachers who are teaching these people, or teachers who are already, they are physically or handicapped, and this is the situation. This is, I would like to summarize their opinion. All institutions in Kerala are currently unsuitable and incapable of hosting students with disabilities with any level of comfort. Physical access, faculty apathy, underpreparedness, peer insensitivity, etc. are the major reasons. And what can we do to increase this and get a higher representation for this community is definitely to mandate physically accessible premises at all public places, enable easy and affordable access to assistive technologies, sensitization of faculty and students on inclusive growth. Now NGOs can be given a role here, help the caregivers and family members to grasp the realities and challenges of higher education, and design and implement new inclusive assessment process. And I will spend 1 minute on the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Now here in this convention, disability was viewed as a situation which arises with the interactions of impairments with various barriers in the society. Now this term needs to be underlined, barriers in the society. And India was also a signatory to this, and based on this, a right to disabilities bill was enacted in the parliament. And what we see is that once the bill came, this term was left out. That is, impairments, that a person remains disabled because of his impairments. The concept of various barriers in the society has been removed. Now you become disabled because of the environmental barrier, the institutional barrier, the psychological barrier, etc. And only if that is given importance, now see, changes can be made in the society. So the bill has, it's already in discussion, and several points. Now another thing is about accessibility, and see, the section in the bill that is introduced in the parliament, the section only speaks on the standards and not about enforcing them, and only accessibility relating to parking spaces, toilets, ticketing counters and ticketing machines, which says that all the disability rights activists and persons with disabilities are speaking against this bill. The whole message of that the United Nations Convention on Rights to Disabilities, now the whole message is now being distracted, or it is distorted with this the bill that is being discussed. And hence I would like to, now I need not explain much because we know what happens in Kerala University. And last time when NAC visited, now the first point of criticism was that the university is not a disability friendly university, and all policies must be taken to incorporate them. And just before 1 month before the NAC visited, now we had some constructions in our departments. Now just to make them know that something is happening there, some pathways were constructed, and once they went, everything came back to the old situation. And no, this issue has to be addressed. It's not because, as I said earlier, one's impairment need not be one's overall disability. You may be having some problem with your mobility, but you will be having a high intellectual power, and once society is able to incorporate changes and to reduce the barriers so that these people are incorporated into the stream, now they definitely can contribute to the society. The pain that the parents, the relatives are suffering once you have such a child. And to conclude, unfortunately, persons with disabilities are routinely subjected to all forms of discrimination, denial and deprival of rights, with the results that they are often marginalized and excluded and made to live in a state of disempowerment and disarticulation. And in higher education, they are visibly invisible, and intervention is the need of the hour at the earliest. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Manju. Now invite Dr. S.R. Shija for presenting her paper.
Respected Chair, esteemed resource persons and my dear friends, the topic of my presentation is Access and Equity in Higher Education in India. As we all know, education has a key role in the socio-economic progress of any nation. In today's global knowledge economy, skills developed through quality education are the major determinants of employability. Apart from imparting skills, education provides opportunity for social mobility also to the younger generation. So one of the best solutions to enhance economic opportunities and to reduce inequality is to improve the educational qualification and skill sets of common people. To maximize the utilization of India's human resource potential, expanding higher education facilities to the common people is very critical. In the light of the huge demographic dividend enjoyed by India, this assumes greater significance. The Indian higher education system has expanded steadily in the post-independence period, and at present it is the second largest education system in the world, comprising of more than 38,000 institutions, and total enrollment in higher education is estimated to be greater than 33 million. According to T.S.R. Subramanian, the chairperson for the Committee for Evaluation of New Education Policy 2016, nearly 1/4 of the population in India are directly involved in teaching-learning process. Private sector accounts for nearly 63% of institutions and 52% of total enrollments, and this is the major player in the higher education sector. The fact that we have been able to build up such a modern system of higher education virtually from scratch since independence is a major achievement. However, our education system is fraught with a large number of issues, and one of the most serious drawbacks of Indian higher education system is related to the reach and inclusiveness of higher education. Ensuring quality education based on the principles of access and equity remains a challenge. Coming to the question of access, gross enrollment ratio is an important indicator of access to higher education. Currently, GER in India is 23.6%. According to Martin Rose, the previous speaker has already spoken about that. We have crossed 15% during the 11th 5-year plan period. And the country is moving from an elite to the massified higher education system. Despite the fact that we are one of the largest education systems in the world, more than 76% of university eligible age group students are not getting enrolled in the colleges. This appears to be a great paradox, and the ultimate outcome of this is the abundant supply of unqualified and unskilled workforce. The international comparison of GER shows that although we have witnessed an unprecedented improvement in the reach of higher education, we still lag behind the world average as well as GER in most of the countries. So expanding higher education is a very important challenge to the Indian higher education system. Coming to the question of equity, Equity refers to equal opportunity for all sections to participate in higher education. A fundamental weakness of Indian higher education system is that the issue is related to the issue of inclusiveness. Students from economically backward and socially disadvantaged groups of the society do not get enough opportunities in India's higher education system. Despite several measures adopted by the government to remove disparities, there still exists discrimination based on gender, caste, location and economic status. Regarding gender inequality, while GER for males in India is 24.5, the corresponding figure for females is only 22.7. Within the different communities also there exists gender disparity. Gender parity index, which is another indicator of gender disparity in higher education, shows that actually the gender parity index for the country is 0.89 and gender parity index for scheduled caste is also 0.89. The corresponding figure among scheduled tribes is 0.79. Both GER and gender parity index figures indicate the existence of unequal opportunities for men and women in Indian higher education system. Now coming to community-based disparities, GER for SCs and STs have always been low as compared to the other communities in India. GER is found to be very low among poor population irrespective of social and religious group. This is then coming to regional inequalities, there is extremely skewed regional distribution of universities and colleges in India. Majority of higher education institutions cluster around metropolitan and urban centers. There are only a few institutions in remote areas. Across states also there is uneven spatial distribution of universities. Nearly 1/3 of the universities are in southern region and lowest number of colleges are found in northeast region. College density also varies from state to state. It varies from 7 in Bihar to 58 in Puducherry, while the all India average is 27. Such glaring imbalances act as a barrier to balance regional development of the country. Successive governments of India have taken various initiatives to remove these disparities. Among these, reservation in higher education institutions is central to the policy of inclusive growth and distributive justice. We all know that the basic idea of reservation system in India is to increase opportunities available to underprivileged communities for improving social and educational status and also to bring them to the mainstream. Some of the intervention measures taken by the government is given in the slides. They include setting up of National Commission for Minority Educational Institutions, then National Commission for National Monitoring Committee for Education of SCs and STs and persons with disabilities, National Merit Cum Means Scholarship Scheme, then special scholarship schemes for Jammu and Kashmir, Indira Gandhi Scholarship for Single Girl Child, development of Women Studies departments in most of the universities and colleges, then construction of hostels for women in colleges located in Northeast, and equal opportunity cell, women technical institutions, model degree colleges, etc. Then some of the recent developments in the field of higher education has greater implications to the question of access and equity. As the conventional mode of education has the capacity to meet the requirements of only a meager proportion of educational aspirants, open and distance learning has become an alternative approach to reach out to the masses, particularly to the disadvantaged sections of the society. Nearly 11.7% of total enrollment in higher education is through the distance mode, and almost 46% of the learners through the distance mode are female students. Massive open online courses is yet another innovative development which offers freedom of access to higher education. The evolution of massive online courses is based on the principle that the urge to learn should not be limited by economic, demographic and geographical constraints. Now coming to some important challenges in the field of higher education in terms of access and equity. At present, Private sector is the major player. Concentration of private investment, particularly in professional and technical education, has restructured the entire higher education system in the country, and this has, of course, thrown up policy debates on their implications. Financially weaker and other disadvantaged segments of the society find it difficult to afford the cost of higher education offered by these private institutions, and they are being excluded from these institutions. Most often, higher education gets lower priority in budget allocations also. The state is gradually withdrawing from the higher education sector. This is a major push factor behind the rise of private funding, which in turn leads to commercialization of education. This is particularly true in the post-reform period, resulting in the exclusion of people from lower rungs of the social strata from higher education. As already mentioned by a previous speaker, Indian higher education has witnessed a silent transformation with the entry of more women and first-generation learners from deprived sections of the society who were denied access previously. Frictions and tensions accompanied by this transformation process are to some extent as a result of these, higher education, to some extent higher education, the field of higher education sector has become a site of conflict. The proposed policy on national education 2016 focuses more on quality and employable skills tailored for the global market. If the government pursues this policy without any compromise, people belonging to the deprived sections of the society, including women and minority, will have to face much greater exclusion. Too much emphasis on quality and employability are expected to undermine the country's efforts towards expansion of the reach and inclusiveness of higher education system. And some argue that there is actually a trade-off between quality and equity. The issue of I'm going to conclude, sir. So, to conclude, the issue of increasing access and reach of higher education with greater equity remains as a major problem in higher education. As inclusion is complex and multidimensional in nature, innovative and appropriate strategies are essential to achieve it. Careful planning and policy framework are essential to eliminate different types of barriers prevailing in higher education and to revamp and upgrade this sector to meet the future challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sheja. Now all the three papers are open for discussion. As chairman, I am not making any observations on this paper for want of time. Chairman's job became very painful today for me because all the three brilliant papers, particularly the first two papers, were based on primary studies and all. Unfortunately, I was not able to give sufficient time for convincing their arguments. But still, I give you 5 minutes time, 5 to 6 minutes time for the participants, for the audience to make some responses to all these three papers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have maybe a response or a comment on Dr. Murugan's paper.
Yes.
If we know the cost of educating a student in a public institution, including operating cost plus capital cost, if we know this to be, let's say, X rupees per year, why can't we give the student a voucher for that amount and tell him to either choose a public institution or a private institution? That way, he will not have to pay the full fees of a private institution, but he'll enjoy the quality benefits of the better infrastructure, better equipment, and better without feeling that he's not able to afford it.
That's a very good suggestion, but we know in Kerala and India, the things are not that easy. It is not ruled by a particular person or a group of persons. So many variations are there. So such changes, though desirable, are very difficult to be implemented in our state. Even the present system is hampered by frequent breakdowns due to Western interests coming in and bringing in unnecessary and dangerous impediments to the implementation of the present rules. Court is always there. It's a free society. So any change has to take place after a very long period and in a truncated manner. That is what is ailing our education system in India and particularly in Kerala, where various groups are acting as very adversely affecting pressure groups.
Yeah.
My question to Manju ma'am. First of all, I admire you for taking up this topic, and I just would like to ask you about research methodology. You mentioned that 300 women or disabled women or generally disabled people were selected for a survey. Could you please tell more about the methods you used while conducting your field survey, like probability sampling, non-probability sampling, questionnaire interviews? Did you go and talk to people personally? How did you select them?
So we selected 300 persons belonging to 5 disability category, and that too from 3 areas, Trivandrum, Ernakulam and Malappuram. That was based on a sampling methodology. And then we focused on the rural, urban, male, female, all these variables were considered for selecting the sample size. And then it was very difficult to identify, to find these persons with disabilities. So what we went is that we have a disability pension being provided, and it was 2 years back we conducted the survey. It was a disability pension is being given through the post offices. So we went and contacted those persons, and once one disabled was identified, a sort of snowballing sampling was also used to identify the other categories, particularly finding disabled females. They remain totally invisible in the society. It was very difficult task finding these people. We had a 50-page questionnaire, we prepared an interview schedule, and I had a project fellow also. 2 years we took to complete the survey, and we didn't find anyone who had higher education. So we conducted an extension of that. We identified 30 persons working in colleges, in medical colleges, in Technopark, etc. And we interviewed them to understand what are the major determinants of their employment, where we could see the education, as Sir said, merit again is a factor of socio-economic status of the individual or the student. Now the socio-economic status, then the parents' education, etc. finally resulted them in a small portion getting employment into getting higher education and getting the system. Thank you.
Ma'am, are there any government institutions for disabled people in Kerala?
Government institutions are there for giving training to them. You have
higher education.
Higher educations, you don't have them. We don't have any particular institute. Now for training you have, for higher education you don't have. We offer 3% reservation for persons with disabilities, and the quota remains unfilled. Now in Kerala University in social science, you know what happens. We personally experienced for the last 3 years. This time also one candidate was there who a partially blind person applied for PG program, and he came there one day and the next day he didn't come. No, this is what we experienced. It's because of the structural barriers that we create for getting these people into our system. Some change must definitely happen. Okay.
Thank you.
Last year, when you move around the street, you see many disabled people. But when we came in 2013, there are less. But this time you see many people increasing on the street, especially begging. When I remember last year, I asked someone what is the issue. Then someone was telling me these people are not from Kerala, they are from other states. But I think this year, I met some groups of people with public address system. They are blind and there's some music and
Okay.
they are doing the begging. Then I was feeling that what is the government or what are people doing? Because when tourists come or when you move around the street, you feel it is not correct. So as this year around July, we had a conference in California, and someone was doing a presentation and was showing the countries with the highest development index.
Highest what? Sorry?
High human development index and high level of human development index.
Human development. Okay. Human development index.
And then about 4 presenters Kerala featured most in that conference. So I'm trying to link what is on paper and what is on
No, that's what I understood your question. That is what I was mentioning. The human development, it's clearly a contradiction in the case of persons with disabilities. When we consider Kerala tops India and it's at par with international experience in terms of human development index. But coming to these persons, now the disabled persons, now we are faring at a much lower position when compared to the Indian averages. So similar to you, I have also seen these blind people singing, maybe in the PMG junction we see them daily, and don't think that all of them are people from outside Kerala. People from inside Kerala are also there. The socio-economic status of these people are very less, and as you rightly pointed out, government is not doing anything for them. Now they are not a pressure group. Now, all other, everything happens, policies come because of what the interest of the pressure groups. So now these people, they are not a voting, maybe not a vote bank, not pressure groups, and hence it becomes, it's a sad part of the story that's what I'm saying, that some change must happen. Okay.
Now I think that there is no more questions and we are finishing this section. I once more thank all the paper presenters and the participants for giving me cooperation at this late hours. Once more I thank the organizer, particularly Dr. Abdul Salim, for inviting me to chair this session. Thank you once more.
Although it was the last session, we had quite warm responses. So for a formal vote of thanks, I invite Kavya Nair.
I would like to intervene. I am extremely happy that I could present my paper in front of my professor, Dr. Suresh Kumar, because he was my teacher in my higher education course. Now it is indeed a pleasure to present a paper in his presence, and also Shija is my classmate, again classmates in higher education. Okay, so thank you so much.
Thank you, Manchu.
Good evening all. We just had a session on one of the most discussed topics in the world, access and equity. And here right now we are discussing about, or we are thinking about access and equity in higher education. And before I begin, I would like to thank the organizers for organizing this session on such a relevant topic. And then firstly I would like to thank the chairperson of the session, Professor P. Suresh Kumar. He warmed us up about the topic by giving a brief understanding that resources are limited, and as a result there is a problem in allocation which leads to exclusion of some sections from higher education. And for this, private and public sector should work together. And the sessions that happened after that gave us an empirical understanding on how public and private sector is working together, as well as the limitations of these initiatives which continue to create a vicious cycle of education where weaker end up being more weaker because they are excluded, even though private and public sector is working together to solve this menace. And the session began by Professor M. Murugan's great speech on access and equity, a study on the impact of self-financing colleges in India. here also we can see a vicious cycle. As government cannot allocate resources properly, some sections are excluded. And that space is covered by self-financing colleges, but these colleges cannot ensure quality education. Again, here quality is connected to purchasing power of people, which again makes these sections more weaker. And he concludes with the right statement that mere access doesn't provide equity, it is just a means. Then we moved on to the section by Manju ma'am, and it was about visibly invisible, the case of disabled in Kerala's higher education scenario. Problem of disability is discussed internationally, and these people who are visible among us become invisible because of the society. And here we can understand that they are differently able, but they are made disabled by many issues like medical, charity, social, etc., which were elaborated by ma'am. And after that, we had a session by Professor S.R. Shija on access and equity in higher education in India. Again, we can see that India has demographic dividend, but this is not going to last. Indian population is aging. So what is happening right now is that even though we have demographic dividend, the problem of equity is not able to provide ample opportunities for everyone in the country. And as a result, we are losing valuable human resources. So again, there are government initiatives. Many things are being done, but nothing is getting implemented properly, which reinitiate this vicious circle. So I would like to extend my gratitude to all the resource persons for giving us great insight on this much debated topic in the world now. Thank you.
जनगण मन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलति तरंगा तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मागे गाहे तव जय गाथा जनगण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे